Thanks, Lee. Well, folks, it's warming up out there, and with summer just around the corner, we all know that Texas heat doesn't care what's planned or where. From here on out, it just keeps showing up. Hi, I'm Harold Hall. I am the risk control consultant from the Northeast region.
And I'm Isaac Garcia. I'm the risk control consultant for the southeast part of the state. Some of you from the north may recognize me as well. Glad to be here and glad to see everybody here.
Absolutely. And we're here to speak with you today about ways to prevent, recognize, and respond to heat stress. Super important. Thanks for joining us.
So, what is heat stress? Harold, here we say Texas leads the nation in workplace heat related deaths. That's 42 on the job related fatalities since 2011. Do you think that's surprising? Let me ask that question first.
No, I don't think it's surprising at all. As you know, Texas is an extremely large state. We have a lot of things going on down here, a lot of, operations, a lot of the largest organizations, as well as even our counties are humongous. So there's a big exposure to individuals that work outside, um, large population. Not surprising at all that we're going to be up at the top when it comes to these type of issues, heat related deaths.
Yeah. And when we talk about heat stress or heat illness, there's obviously different types of heat illnesses out there. We talk about heat stroke, um, we talk about heat rash and things like that. But all in all, a heat illness is a heat illness, and we can do a lot of the same things across the board to prevent these heat illnesses. And essentially, what a heat illness is, it's the body losing its ability to cool effectively. Now, there's a lot of things that come into play there. There's the environmental factors. Here, we're talking about um, the sun. Obviously, the sun with those UV rays can come down on us hard, create a little bit of heat illness there. There's the temperature outside, but not only the temperature, we look at the heat index because it's that temperature and how the humidity affects that temperature. So here, those environmental factors come into play. The heat illness that we deal with in the panhandle can be very different than the heat illness that we deal with um, in the east part of the state, in the piney woods and in the swampy areas. So very, very different types of heat illness. But again, the things that we do to keep some of these heat illnesses at bay are very often the same things. There's work factors that come into play. So we're talking here about what kind of exertion we're doing. If we're working in an air conditioned area, if we're working outside. Um, and here it's about creating a good environment to keep those risks at bay before those symptoms even appear. Now, there's a lot that heat does to affect our body. Harold, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So essentially what happens when it gets hot outside and you're outside working is that your body is sweating, and that sweat is evaporating, attempting to cool your body. And eventually, if you're out there and you're not rehydrating or replenishing your fluids, then your body core starts to overheat. And when that happens, a couple of things are going to take place. You're going to experience some discomfort. You're going to have possible fatigue, physical discomfort. Your focus may be reduced, as well as your coordination. And one that really concerns me is your decision-making ability. Imagine operating a piece of heavy machinery, and all of a sudden, all of these things are now lagging, and you're not seeing things correctly. Your concentration's off, and your reaction times are off. So it's really, really important that we take notice of these symptoms and take action immediately.
And talking about these symptoms, one of the symptoms that we talk about is excessive sweating, right? So we always talk about people, oh, like, this person was just sweating profusely. Does sweat by itself, is that an indicator that we are possibly suffering some kind of heat related illness?
I would say that excessive sweating means it's excessively hot outside. But I will say, if you see someone that's excessively sweating and say they have some of like a risk profile, or they're on, a higher condition that they're suffering from, I would keep an eye on that person. But excessively sweating in and of itself isn't a major risk factor. Your body is doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is sweat, so that the sweat then evaporates and cools your body.
Yeah, so here, just because somebody's sweating excessively, essentially what we should be doing is keeping an eye on them, making sure that they get plenty of water, because at the point where the body loses the water and they stop sweating, well, that's going to be something to to take note of there. Um, as far as prevention goes, there's different things that we can do for prevention. Here we talk a lot about different things. Like I just mentioned, we talk about drinking plenty of water throughout the day. We talk about rest. We talk about shade and cooling. But Harold, I think here the basic gist of it is that most of us know what we need to do to keep these heat illnesses from happening. I think what happens most of the time is it's poor planning, right?
Yep,
Not
exactly.
often,
That's
not
exactly what.
oftentimes do we have water available. Um, oftentimes we may be a little bit overzealous when we're planning to get jobs done. I know that happens to me personally. I'm going to be working outside. I say I'm going to get these 10 items done before the end of the day, and I don't give myself time for a break. Um,
Yeah.
oftentimes we don't provide our employees that shade and cooling. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of these items, Harold?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of hit the nail on the head, is that we all have a general idea of how to keep ourselves hydrated. Drink water, right? We all know when it gets too hot and the sun's beaming down, it's always a good idea to get shade, maybe hop into our, vehicle or go inside and get a little AC. We all know that. But for instance, this weekend, I was doing some landscaping work here at my home, and I'm, hauling rocks and digging in the ground. And the funny thing is I thought I had hydrated, but that morning I had drank a huge thing of coffee, which is a natural diuretic and dehydrates you. And by the time it got around noon o'clock or noon, um, I was just completely out of it, exhausted. And one thing that I noticed is that I was bending over to grab some weeds, and I stood up and I felt a little dizzy. And I was like, wait a minute, that is one of those symptoms. And so I went into the house and I rehydrated, and I took a good 30, 45 minute break. And so I think it's about the planning. I think it comes down to planning your day and having an understanding of what the heat's going to be, what the environment's going to be, and what the actual operation or what physical demands are going to be placed on you during that time frame, and taking the appropriate action, Isaac.
Yeah, and I think here acclimatization is a big key too. Like like we have here, it says 20% of the normal workload in day one. And that's just because our bodies need that time to acclimate. Not to get too much into the science of it, but over the course of winter, or as we're in air conditioned temperatures, our bodies, the fat chemistry actually changes to be able to insulate us better from those colder temperatures. And once we start moving into the summer months, or once we come out from the air condition, our bodies don't immediately just flip a switch and say, hey, we're good to go. It
Yeah.
takes us some time for our chemistry to change again. And that way we can be more acclimated for those hot conditions and our bodies work well in those hot conditions.
And that's a
So,
lesson learned this weekend.
um, so, typically speaking, a typical timeline for acclimatization, days 1 to 3, that's going to be the hardest time for us to acclimate. Typically speaking, you'll have a much higher heart rate and you'll get fatigue a lot quicker. I don't know anybody that's ever gone out fishing on the lake or floating down a river, and you go from the air condition, and even though you're in the water, if you're out there for 4 hours a day, you are completely exhausted by the end of those 4 hours. So that's usually that acclimatization that happens within those first 1 to 3 days. From there, about days 4 to 7, um, you start to sweat a lot better and your body starts to feel a little bit easier. You also tend to retain a lot of hydration better. And then all the way from anywhere from 8 days to 14 days is where the normal person would acclimate. So that's why we say here we increase somebody's work gradually over a 2 week period. Um,
And
and
it's really
I think,
oh,
Harold,
I'm
you
so
were
sorry.
mentioning earlier how this is not just moving from winter to summer, but being cognizant of somebody going on vacation. Do you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine, you've been out there, you've been working, you've become acclimated, and then hey, it's vacation time, and you go away for a week, a couple weeks, have some fun. At that point, you're always in air conditioning. You're always, cool. If it's too hot outside, you just go right back inside and you hang out there in the AC. And then all of a sudden you throw yourself back into work at the end of your vacation, and now you're back in 100-degree days, 110 humidity. And you'll notice very quickly that your body is not ready for that. So it's super important to not only focus on the new workers, but also your returning workers. If they're gone for a few days, give them the opportunity to become acclimated again to the actual environment before you fully expose them to the full day and full workload.
Yeah, and also pay attention to what type of work they're doing. If you're moving from mowing season to paving season, pulling somebody out of an air conditioned mower and then moving them straight into the back of a chip seal truck, and they're working those long shifts, that can get dangerous very quickly. So give them some time to acclimate. Harold, what about that scheduling? What about the people with those higher risk factors?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I want to say when it comes to scheduling is we need to take into consideration all the factors whenever we're creating the schedule. And one thing we want to do is ensure that the shifts start as early as possible to avoid those peak eating hours. We don't want to be out there late in the afternoon. The sun has had an opportunity to bake the concrete as well as dry up all the moisture from the grass, and it's causing the temperatures to significantly skyrocket, especially later on in the week. If we had like a week of 90+ degree days, that Thursday is going to be significantly hot. You also, as you're creating your schedules, you want to make sure that you're rotating any of those high exertion tasks, any type of task that's going to require the worker to really, really engage in some significant activity. You want to make sure that you're appropriately rotating those across your personnel so that they're not holding on to that entire burden. And then, of course, during the actual shift, once you get started, you want to reassess from time to time throughout the day to make sure that you're on track with understanding exactly where the heat is and how it's impacting your workers. Keep a very solid lookout on your folks while they're out there. Now, when it comes to individual risk factors, we want to make sure that we are cognizant and we understand, what conditions are at greater risk to extreme heat. So folks that have, maybe existing heart disease or cardiovascular conditions, if they're taking certain medications, and typically they will know individually what type of medications they're taking and what that does to them. If it dehydrates them, if they need to take in more fluids, they should know that, but you want to be at least generally aware of those situations. Also, being in shape is super important. So we're looking at obesity. Folks that are a little bit more obese may have a more difficult time out in these extreme environments. And of course, anyone that's expecting, pregnant, we want to keep a very close eye on them and kind of prevent anything from happening there. So you want to make sure that you are keeping a close eye on them, I think.
Yeah, and here I'd also just like to add in that it's important that we don't just look at somebody and say, "Hey, you know what? You don't look like you have any health issues," and say you're good to work. For example, me, I'm a I consider myself to be a fairly fit person. I wouldn't consider myself athletic, but also would consider myself to be in good shape. In the same respect, I'm a diabetic. So one risk factor for me is that during the heat, my insulin absorption increases at higher temperatures. So I may start to get chills. I may start to feel fatigue. It's important for me as an individual to understand that, hey, this could be related to heat illness, but it could also be related to my sugar levels. So again, here it's just making sure that we let our employees know that they have a safe space, that if they need to take a break to figure things out, they have that time. You need to check your sugar levels. Great, do it. You need to grab a drink of water? Great, do it. You need to take a break? Yes, sit down. We got some shaded area over here. But making sure that we provide our employees that, don't just assume that your employees are going to feel comfortable in doing that. Make sure you make it evident to them that they can take those breaks.
Absolutely. And I think we should focus on some of the early warning signs that they may see, Isaac, in their teammates or within themselves. I know we mentioned briefly heavy sweating. I would consider that a very early warning sign of someone, especially if they're already sweating extremely heavy and, you just started. And that would be someone that as a teammate, I would keep a very close eye on just to make sure that I notice if they stop sweating, that I'm taking the proper precautions and actions to take care of that for them. What else do you think we need to keep in the lookout for, Isaac?
Well, when somebody's sweating heavily, the other thing that we need to make sure that we're doing is understanding that as they're sweating, minerals are coming out of their body. I will say by far, first and foremost, water is number one. We need to make sure that we're replenishing the water that they're sweating. But if they're sweating for more than 2 hours straight, they've lost quite a bit of minerals. So things like electrolyte drinks, think Gatorade, but also other minerals like calcium and whatnot. So think juices. Make sure that they are replenishing those minerals. That could lead to other types of heat illness. For example, people losing too many minerals, they'll start to get heat cramps. So somebody that their muscles are getting sore and whatnot, they're not getting enough minerals back in their body. But again, like we said, heavy sweating, that's to be expected. Things that we should not see are extreme fatigue, nausea. I was just out on a motorcycle ride weekend before last, and one of the guys that was with us, he was wearing some pretty thick motorcycle gear that was probably better suited for winter than spring. And we had to pull over on the side of the road. He started vomiting. We had to make sure that he was well hydrated, make sure that he got under a tree. We cooled him off with some wet towels and whatnot. At the end of the day, he was fine. But again, it's realizing those symptoms are coming forward and not just pushing those pushing through those symptoms, so to speak. But headaches, dizziness, like you mentioned before, confusion. If we have somebody that's having a hard time understanding or keeping track with the tasks that they're up to, we need to make sure that we're paying attention to those and making sure that those people are being taken care of, making sure they get plenty of water, making sure that they're staying cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we talk about assessing and treating someone that's suffering from a heat illness, there are essentially two levels. So when it comes to heat exhaustion, again, we're looking for symptoms like the weakness, the nausea, dizziness. Typically, that means the worker is going to be conscious, and you may have to remind them that, hey, take a break, get something to drink. I'll go with you to make sure that you're okay. Put them in the truck, turn on the air conditioning, put them in a cool shaded area, or those type of things. But there's one condition which is considered the heat stroke when you start noticing like confusion, slurred speech, they're no longer sweating, and of course, loss of consciousness. If someone is suffering from any of these conditions, your very first action should be to call 911. Get the emergency personnel on the way to the scene to properly assess and treat that individual, your teammate. And we're still going to go through the process of attempting to cool them as far as with, the ice packs and anything that's available, whether, you're giving them light fluids, you're monitoring them, you're making sure that they are cooling down. But the most important thing here is to get first aid started and get those emergency personnel on the way. Isaac, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, here I would say take everything with caution. Harold, one of the things that people do is sometimes they try to, somebody comes back from passing out and immediately they try to get them to drink a gallon of water. Do you think that's a good idea?
Definitely not a good idea. I mentioned have them sip water because just because they wake up does not mean the rest of their body is awake or maybe something's going on internally. So you want to make sure that you're properly assessing them and ensuring that when you're about to give them water, that they're able to take that water and be able to swallow and things of that nature. So you want to just, kind of assess them, have them take a little a light sip, and then once it's determined that they're able to drink, then you can, allow them to drink more. But I would definitely not shove a gallon of water in someone's down someone's throat that's just woken up. That's a very dangerous situation and scenario.
Yeah, and this also we want to make sure that we're not putting these people into shock. So, we don't want to we want to take them in an air conditioned room, but it probably wouldn't be a good idea to stick them in a freezer right away. So, you know, take everything with a little bit of caution here. Any changes that you make sure that you make the changes um, slowly. Like we said, sips of water, bringing them into an air conditioned area slowly. That's always a good idea. But a lot of this comes to the supervisor's responsibility. And anytime we talk about the supervisor's responsibility, we're also talking about the team's responsibility. Here, we always want to try to have a written program. Um, Oftentimes we go to counties and they say, well, my employees know what they're supposed to be doing. They've lived in Texas their entire life. They know what heat stress is, which is true in most cases, but we want to make sure that we're creating an environment where an employee feels safe to let us know if there's something wrong. And part of the way that we do that is with a written program. We
Yep.
let them know, hey, it is in writing that you should be taking breaks. We let them know it is in writing that you should be drinking water. It is in writing that if you start feeling ill, you need to let your supervisor know and make sure you stop working and take a break. Oftentimes, and I'm going to be one of the people that falls into this category, I start feeling those symptoms, and my stubbornness is what makes me want to push through it. So we need to make sure that we are also setting expectations. Um, Briefing the crew before work begins. Um, we like to push safety meetings that we call toolbox talks, and we actually have a couple that Harold will throw on here in a few minutes. If you all want to download, you're more than welcome to download. And what's really great about these toolbox talks is it takes no more than about 10 minutes to go through. And you basically will read a sheet of paper, talk about the subject with your employees, um, and let them know, hey, this is what could possibly happen. This is what we need to be doing to prevent it. I know a lot of supervisors attend these webinars, but we need to make sure that that information is getting down to our ground level employees. And again, yes, they do understand what heat illness is, but they also need to understand that we are doing what we can to make sure that they are keeping those heat illnesses at bay. We all remember the buddy system from grade school, and I think this is not just good from the illness related aspect of things, but also just from a general safety aspect of things. We've had it happen on multiple occasions, actually, not too long ago, where somebody's out in an excavator and they are working on something and a fire takes place and they're the only ones out there. Um, what do they do in that respect? What happens if they get burned? What happens if they get heat illness? We don't want that person alone on the side of the road, alone in the middle of the woods, trying to figure out what to do. So, buddy system is always good to have in place. And then an active monitoring system. Here, this is basically asking ourselves every day, if not every hour, what is the temperature like? What kind of exertion can I push out at this temperature? Um, Here, you'll find a lot of road crews when we move into summer months, we start switching to summer schedules, starting at 6 or 7 o'clock just to beat the heat. That's part of that active monitoring program. We need to make sure that we are making that our employees are not working out in those peak hours. And we're again not just talking about the actual temperature, but we're also talking about the heat index and the humidity and how that plays a role in that. But again,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's the culture. Normalized speaking of Harold, we always talk about psychological safety. Could you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about psychological safety and what that means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to safety culture and psychological safety, I think it's important for leadership to not
Harold,
give
you
out.
cut
Is
out a little bit.
that a little better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to safety culture and building a safety culture, reinforcing it as well as psychological safety, I think it's extremely important for leadership to not only, focus on passing the information and setting those expectations early. Obviously, that's important, but to also make sure that you're letting your folks know that you're concerned about them and you care about their overall well-being. And that's what these toolbox talks do. When you take a 10-minute break at the beginning of the schedule, or excuse me, the beginning of the actual day, and let them know, hey, it's going to be hot outside. Hey, let's make sure you're hydrating. Hey, while we're standing here, let's all just hydrate right now. When you do things like that, it's indicating that you care about their well being. That goes above and beyond the project that you're doing that day. And one of the final capstones of that is encouraging your employees to speak up. Empower them with the ability to stop work and let you know that something is wrong. A lot of times, newer employees, especially, they don't want to speak up. So, Isaac a moment ago mentioned that it's stubbornness. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I know we have to get this done today, so I'm just going to shut my mouth and keep working. We need to dispel all of that. So you want to make sure at those toolbox talks, that 10-minute talk at the beginning of the shift, let them know, hey, I expect you and I encourage you to speak up if there's an unsafe condition. If one of your workers is in pain or is suffering from some sort of heat exposure, let us know so that we can take the appropriate action. And again, that's kind of indicating that, hey, I care about you as an individual person, not just as another worker on this team, but I want you to come to work and get home the same way you came in. So it's extremely important to vocally encourage and empower that speaking up from your employees.
Yeah, I like that term empower. That's a good way of putting it. So here we got a daily heat checklist. Um, Basically what we should be doing at the beginning of every shift, huh, Harold?
Yep, exactly. This is just reinforcing and kind of summarizing everything we've already spoken about. We're going to do that pre-shift heat brief where we let them know about the forecast, what the project is, how, what the difficult parts of the task are, any type of elevated risk conditions. And we're going to do that hydration check. Like I said, it's always a good idea while you're standing there, you can actually watch every single person grab something to drink. I was in the Marine Corps, and if anyone's been in the military and went through boot camp, we had to stand on that line and drink that whole canteen and hold it up above our head. I'm not saying go to that extreme, but you can actually see and watch these folks drink water right at that toolbox talk just to ensure that you know that they have started the day with the proper fluid and not coffee like I did this weekend. Again, you want to ensure that everyone's working in pairs and they're looking out for one another, and also stopping and evaluating. Super critical. A lot of times the forecast is incorrect. Like it'll say it's supposed to be 85 around 3 p.m. You look at, your app or you look at the temperature and it is 92 degrees out there and with the humidity, the heat index is pushing towards 100. So we need to make sure that we are properly assessing multiple times during that actual shift, Isaac.
Yeah. And one of the ways that we can do that, so here what we have is a heat tool that's provided by OSHA. And if you look at this heat tool, what it will actually do, and you can use this QR code on the side. I will say that this is a safe QR code. Um, and this QR code will take you to the either the iOS or the Android store to download this app. And what you can see here is that we're looking at different areas of the state. So we looked at Austin, maybe not too much on the heat, but we're looking at McAllen now, and it's letting us know that at 93 degrees, especially with the heat index there, the humidity is much higher there than it is in Central Texas, that we need to start taking precautions. So you can use this tool to help plan, see what those temperatures and that heat index is going to look like. But you could also use this tool to see what we may need to be doing to adjust our work activities, what we may need to be doing to be protecting our employees. And if your employees download this, they can also look at the signs and symptoms of the different types of heat illnesses out there, as well as first aid measures for taking care of these different types of things. So I really like this tool here, Harold.
Do too. It's a great tool. I have it downloaded on my phone. I typically, whenever I start speaking about heat exhaustion or heat stroke in a training class, I put this QR code up and I ask everyone to grab their phone and take a picture and get this downloaded. It's an extremely useful tool where you can not only see what's going on, a few days in advance, maybe, but also be able to reassess the conditions based on, like, if you think about it, there are times where you may have to move personnel from one location to another. And maybe you're starting here, but you got to go, on the other side of the county where it may be more hot. The conditions may be a little bit different. And so you want to make sure that they have some tool that can give them specific information based on their location and their environment. This is the complete tool that gives you all of that information right in the palm of your hand. It's a fantastic tool. I'd recommend everyone download it now. Just click on that QR code and it should be free. It's been free every time I've downloaded it. So I would definitely take advantage of this.
Way better than just going outside and seeing if my glasses fog up, huh?
Exactly, exactly. And again, so what we're speaking about here today is I like to call it the CDO principle: conditions plus decisions equal outcomes. If you are properly as a leader or even as a team member, if you are looking at the conditions and have a good understanding of what the conditions are, you can make the best decision possible based on those conditions. And if you're able to do that, then your outcomes will be positive. A lot of times when we see cases like this or things that are happening, what we usually can come back to is either someone didn't properly assess the conditions or they made a decision that was an incorrect one. I think the conditions and the decisions are pretty straightforward when it comes to heat and how you deal with the heat. And we want to see nothing but positive conditions coming out of the counties this year. I would hate to see anyone injured or suffer from any of these. So please, please keep this in mind. CDO principle, just CDO it. And I sure will be sending that actual QR code back over toward the end of the actual presentation. We'll definitely do that. Isaac, did you have anything to add on this one?
No, and here I think for me it always comes back to the culture.
Yep.
And for people who know me, I say that quite often. Um, and here I really like this principle just because it really does say, hey, it's not just about what was happening, but it's the decisions that we make. And here, setting those expectations before work begins, just like we have listed here,
Mhm.
we assume way too often. We assume that our employees will know what to do. We assume that our employees have some common sense. I remember I used to have a high school teacher that I would always tell us common sense is not always common. Um, Even if it is, do our employees again feel safe letting us know, hey, I can't work at this time, letting us know, hey, I can't complete this task for whatever reason. So, for me, it's a lot about the culture that helps us identify those hazards. If we can create a culture where the supervisors are not the only ones that are watching out for the hazards, that the employees are too, if we create a culture that employees not only watch out for their own well-being but for the well-being of others around them, then we're much better off. So, here, yes, we're talking about heat stress, but I think a lot of these concepts go throughout the entire county and go throughout whatever hazards we're dealing with.
You are absolutely right, correct there, Isaac, because this is something that I push regardless of what I'm speaking about when it comes to putting individuals and your teammates in areas where they may be injured. It's always important to have a shared commitment to safety. And if we do that and we follow these steps, which discuss safety expectations, identify and immediately correct these hazards, follow safe work best practices every single time, and empower our employees to stop work when the conditions become anything than safe, and aim to continuously improve. If you follow these steps, the outcomes and just the overall work product becomes so much more better. So this is something I would like you all to take away from this is regardless of what we're speaking of, build that shared commitment to safety within your teams. If everyone feels that they are an equal partner in ensuring that everyone gets home the same way they came in, that does the trick. That will minimize the amount of injuries you see and things that impact your actual crews. And just to close out, I will say that every heat-related fatality was preceded by warning signs, and those warning signs could have been acted on. We want to make sure that we're following those steps that I mentioned earlier. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our people and showing them that we're concerned and we care about them day by day. And when you do things like that, you'll see these positive outcomes that we want to see reflected in the counties. Isaac, anything to add to that?
No, and I think it's one of those things, like we said before, it's throughout the county. So whether we're talking about heat stress, whether we're talking about driving safety, whether we're talking about personal protective equipment, the fact of the matter is that these incidents aren't just tied to one department. Most people, when we think about heat stress, we think a lot about our road and bridge employees. We think about them working out in the heat, but we have also had quite a few heat illnesses happen in law enforcement. And when you think about it, these guys are carrying a lot of gear on them that doesn't breathe so well. Um, Even though they're in the air condition most of the time, every once in a while they got to jump out and get into action, and that could throw them into a heat stress related incident. So pay attention to what's around. Again, let your employees know what they can do to keep these heat illnesses at bay. But it all starts with the supervisors. We need to make sure that we are putting forward a good culture.
Absolutely. And honestly, that's just the TAC way. That's what we believe in when we come and we speak with you regarding, safety conditions and how you're doing overall as a county. We promote all of these things. It's really in your best interest to look out for your employees, keep them safe, and we want to give you the tools and all necessary information to accomplish that goal. So we're always here for you. Again, my name is Harold. I am in the Northeast. I take care of all the safety functions in the Northeast, and Isaac's down south in the southeastern part of the state. We're always here for you. Your TAC team will always be available for you. Feel free to give us a call at any time, and we'll be there. And I
All right.
appreciate your time this morning.
Harold, can we
Yeah, the form, I've been trying to put them into the chat. It doesn't look like it's working for me, so I may need to ship them over to Lee and have her send them out. For some reason, it won't let me attach them to the chat.
Okay. Yeah, folks.
If you just email them
like we
to me,
said,
Harold, I can do it right now.
Will do. I'm sending them over to you right now.
yeah, folks. And if you need anything else as far as those toolbox talks or other resources for training, um, get with your risk control consultant. We have a few resources available for training, including those toolbox talks. And if you'd like any training from us, you know, we're always available to provide whatever kind of training you need. We provide training on a wide range of topics, everything from the employee level stuff, such as heat illness, personal protective equipment, back injuries, slip, trips, and falls. But we also go to the higher end stuff. So talking about incident investigation, talking about supervisor safety responsibilities or safety culture, like we've been talking a lot about. So if you all have any questions on any of that, please contact your risk control consultant and we'll be more than happy to help you all out. And I think we'll toss it back over to Lee now.
Yes, I am multitasking over here. I'm putting these toolbox talks into, I said I am doing it. Let's see.
Yeah, they wouldn't work for me.
Yeah, we might have turned that off. So if you would like those, I'm going to just go ahead and put our TAC RCS email address in here. If you could just, would you like a copy of those? Just send me an email and I'll send those over to you. So we won't waste anybody's time trying to get those into the chat. But thank you all for attending today. We will have a recording of this presentation that will be available probably later on this week on our webinars archive page. So again, thank you for attending, and we will be having more webinars coming up. We've got one on workers' compensation on Wednesday. Be sure to check the TAC calendar of events for all the upcoming webinars. And again, thanks for your participation today.
Thank you for your time,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.